Charge!
12,000 Romans faced more than 100,000 Armenians, and won in a single afternoon. Ancient historians claimed that only 5 Romans fell that day. An impossible number, perhaps, but a testament to the legend this battle became. Exaggeration or not, the staggering gap in losses makes the Battle of Tigranocerta one of Rome's strangest victories. On paper, it looked suicidal, one lone Roman legion daring to challenge the vast empire of Armenia, ruled by a king who commanded nations. King Tigranes the Great commanded armored cavalry, volleys of archers, and endless infantry. Facing him was Lucullus, a disciplined Roman general commanding barely 13,000 men, outnumbered nearly 10 to 1. By all logic, Rome should have been crushed. Instead, Lucullus spotted a weakness and turned it into one of the boldest wins in Roman history. Welcome to Great History, your daily history channel where we share incredible stories of ancient warfare. If you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss more epic battles like this one, because what happened at Tigranocerta didn't just decide one fight. It reshaped the way military strategy would be understood for centuries. Let's find out. Everything began in 69 BC, right in the middle of the Third Mithridatic War. This was the last and most decisive of 3 major clashes between Rome and Mithridates VI of Pontus, the king who ruled along the southern coast of the Black Sea. Mithridates had spent decades trying to carve out an empire at Rome's expense. He fought them in Greece, in Asia Minor, and even launched naval campaigns across the Aegean. He was feared not only for his military skill, but also for his brutality. In 88 BC, he ordered what Roman sources call the Asiatic Vespers, the mass killing of as many as 80,000 Roman and Italian settlers across Asia Minor. That massacre burned his name into Roman memory as one of their greatest enemies. After suffering defeat after defeat at the hands of Roman commanders like Sulla and later Lucullus, Mithridates had few safe havens left. By 69 BC, with Roman pressure closing in, he fled north and east, crossing into Armenia. There he found refuge with his son-in-law, Tigranes II the Great, king of Armenia. Tigranes wasn't just any monarch. He was one of the most powerful rulers of the Eastern world at the time. Under his reign, Armenia expanded into a true empire, stretching from the shores of the Black Sea down to the Mediterranean coast of Syria and even threatening parts of Mesopotamia. Ancient writers describe him as a man of immense pride, wealth, and ambition. He even took the title King of Kings, the same lofty style once used by Persian emperors to make clear he was not just a local king, but a sovereign over other kings. As part of his vision, Tigranes built a brand new capital, Tigranocerta. This city, located in what is now southeastern Turkey, was meant to shine as a monument to his glory. He filled it with palaces, theaters, markets, and walls that were still under construction by the time the Romans arrived. To populate his new capital, Tigranes forcibly resettled tens of thousands of people from conquered regions, uprooting whole communities from places like Cappadocia, Cilicia, and Mesopotamia. The result was a city impressive on the surface, but one with divided loyalties inside its walls. Lucullus knew this new capital was Tigranes' personal project, the symbol of his power. If it fell, Tigranes would lose face not just with Rome, but with his own subjects and vassals. That pressure worked in Rome's favor. When Lucullus sent a demand that Tigranes surrender Mithridates, the Armenian king was outraged. To hand over his father-in-law would not only insult his honor, but also undermine his claim as an equal to Rome. He flatly refused. Instead of waiting for reinforcements or building up a larger supply base, Lucullus then made one of the boldest moves of the entire war. He led his army straight across the Euphrates River and deep into Armenian territory. His force was astonishingly small compared to what he was about to face. Ancient sources differ, but Plutarch describes Lucullus having about 16,000 heavy infantry, veteran legionaries hardened by years of war, plus around 1,000 cavalry and light troops. Other estimates place his total closer to 12,000 to 15,000 Romans, supported by a few thousand local auxiliaries. To put that in perspective, this was just a single Roman army group, nothing like the massive legions that would later march under Caesar or Pompey. Lucullus wasted no time. His legions advanced at a pace that stunned even the locals. Instead of getting bogged down in sieges or waiting for reinforcements, he struck directly into the heart of Armenia, seizing small but strategic towns along the way. Many of them acted as supply depots and relay points for Tigranes' armies. By snapping them up one after another, Lucullus cut off communication lines and forced the Armenian king to respond before he was ready. Tigranes, caught off guard, had been busy dealing with unrest in the western stretches of his empire, especially in places like Syria, where local rulers had begun pushing back against Armenian control. News of Lucullus's advance reached him while he was still trying to stamp out these disturbances. He reacted the only way he knew how, by summoning a massive army. Messengers raced out across Armenia, Cappadocia, Mesopotamia, and beyond. Lords and client kings were ordered to send troops at once. What gathered around Tigranes was one of the largest forces recorded in the ancient world. Ancient writers, especially Plutarch, loved to throw out huge numbers. They tell us Tigranes boasted of 20,000 archers and slingers, 55,000 cavalry, of which 17,000 were heavily armored cataphracts, and 150,000 heavy infantry, plus countless camp followers and support staff. That would bring his force to somewhere around 225,000 men. Modern historians, of course, are skeptical. The logistics of feeding and moving 250,000 soldiers in that region would have been nearly impossible. Most scholars today suggest a more realistic number of 70,000 to 100,000 combat troops. But even the lower estimate would have outnumbered Lucullus's 12,000 to 15,000 by at least 5 to 1. Yet Lucullus believed that numbers weren't everything. What he trusted was the iron discipline of Roman legionaries, their ability to hold formation under pressure, and the speed with which they could move and strike. He gambled that by advancing quickly, striking first and forcing Tigranes to react on Roman terms, he could overcome what looked like impossible odds. Lucullus, however, moved quickly enough to occupy high ground near Tigranocerta before the Armenian host was fully assembled. From the hills, his legions could strike at the enemy's flank, a tactical advantage that would later prove decisive. Instead of storming the city walls, Lucullus tightened the siege and waited. He knew Tigranes would have no choice but to march his army to relieve the capital. As the siege of Tigranocerta tightened, Lucullus did not rush to storm the walls. Instead, he played a waiting game. He knew Tigranes couldn't let his capital be surrounded for long. The city, though impressive, had unfinished sections, walls still being completed, and many of its inhabitants were not long-time residents. Many had been relocated there from various conquered regions. Their loyalty was never fully assured, and some inside the walls later betrayed the city when the moment came. Moreover, Tigranes was under intense political pressure. In the ancient world, a king's prestige depended heavily on appearing strong, leading from the field, confronting threats head-on, not cowering behind walls. If Tigranes remained inside, it might be seen as cowardice or as losing control, weakening his grip over reluctant provinces or client kings. Also, many of his forces, armored cavalry, large numbers of infantry, were built for open battle. If he could draw Lucullus out, he might exploit his numerical superiority and cavalry weight. Staying inside a fortress would limit mobility, negate charge power, and force a long siege, a scenario where Roman discipline and engineering might give Lucullus the advantage. Eventually, the Armenian king would have to march his endless army straight toward the Roman lines. Lucullus intended to meet him there, not on the city walls, but in open battle, where discipline and tactics could outweigh sheer numbers. By the autumn of 69 BC, both armies were finally facing off. The Roman camp, though tense, was steady, composed of hardened veterans who had served under Lucullus through years of campaigning in Anatolia and Pontus. These soldiers were not simply tough. They were drilled, disciplined, and seasoned by hardship. They'd marched long distances, built fortified camps nightly, kept tight formation in bad weather and under missile fire, stayed loyal even when greatly outnumbered. They carried pila, javelins, to disrupt enemy ranks, then closed with short swords when the battle came down to hand-to-hand fighting. They trusted Lucullus implicitly. His daring strategy, moving quickly, seizing key towns, using terrain to his advantage, had won them victories before, and they believed it would do so again. Then finally, Tigranes arrived, not with a modest host, but with what looked like an ocean of men. The ancient sources say the horizon itself seemed alive. Miles of infantry, lines of cavalry, archer and slinger units interspersed, and long baggage trains that extended into the dust behind them. At their center rode the Armenian cataphracts, the shock cavalry that inspired fear across the Eastern world. These cataphracts did not ride lightly. Both horse and rider were clad nearly head to hoof in metal scale armor. The overlapping plates of bronze or iron sewn to leather backings covering the chest, shoulders, flanks, legs, and in some cases the horse's neck and head as well. The rider wore a helmet, often with just slits for the eyes, and maybe a small opening for the nose, only enough to see and breathe. The armor weighed heavily. Some reconstructions suggest that just the armor for a single cataphract, horse plus rider, could run around 40 kilograms or more, depending on how fully protected the horse was. They carried long lances, contis, designed to crash through enemy lines, supported by swords or axes as backup weapons in close quarters. When these men all advanced together, thundering hooves, clinking metal, drawn lances, they formed both a physical wall and a psychological one. To Roman soldiers, seeing those heavily armored horsemen wheel into formation, the sight would have been terrifying. Wings of cavalry that seemed nearly invincible. Ancient writers called them an unstoppable iron tide sweeping across the plain. Modern scholars doubt the numbers, but agree the sight was overwhelming. Each armored horseman was a living tank of bronze and iron. Their thunder alone could break weaker armies. Behind them stood endless ranks of archers and infantry. The Romans faced an enemy that could swallow them whole. Even Tigranes' own generals urged caution, trapped them, starved them. But the king mocked their fear. He called the Romans too few to be an army, too many to be envoys. His arrogance set the stage for disaster. October 6, 69 BC, the armies met outside Tigranocerta. The Armenians held the high ground. Tigranes placed his cataphracts in the center, ready to crush Rome head-on. Lucullus knew a frontal fight meant suicide, so he prepared a trap. He left 6,000 to hold the line, while he led 2 cohorts on a hidden flank march. From the ridge, he could strike the Armenian rear, their weakest point. Tigranes mistook the movement for retreat and mocked them again. But the Romans weren't fleeing. They were hunting. At the crest, Lucullus saw the massive Armenian camp spread. Below, tents, wagons, herds, servants. It was a city in chaos waiting to burn. Lucullus pointed down and said, "This is where we win." He ordered the attack straight into the unguarded rear. Panic exploded. Servants, traders, and animals crashed into their own army. Confusion turned to catastrophe as Roman discipline met Armenian chaos. Tigranes watched in horror as his army collapsed from within. Lucullus ordered a full advance. Marina's men hit the front while Lucullus struck the rear. Trapped between both attacks, the Armenians broke. The cataphracts had no room to charge. They became targets instead of terrors. Panic spread faster than orders could be shouted. Discipline vanished. Survival ruled. Even Tigranes fled, casting away his crown. With no leader, resistance died instantly. The plain became a slaughter. Roman precision met no mercy. Over 100,000 Armenians fell. Some say only 5 Romans died. Propaganda or not, the scale was unmatched. Lucullus marched straight to Tigranocerta. With its king gone, the city surrendered instantly. Its treasures became Rome's reward. Yet Lucullus spared the civilians. He let Greek settlers return home, winning loyalty instead of fear. Word of his victory stunned Rome. No one believed one legion had crushed an empire. Lucullus's fame echoed across the Republic. But his campaign wasn't over. Mithridates and Tigranes escaped. Still, his victory proved strategy can defeat any number.